Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Eileen Lynch. I am the Executive Director with Parkinson's Resource Organization. And if this is your first time with us, welcome. With us today is Dr. Jori Fleisher. Jori Fleisher is an Associate Professor of Neurological Sciences at Rush University Medical Center. Dr. Fleisher is a movement disorder neurologist who co-directs the Rush Parkinson's Foundation Center of Excellence. And Dr. Fleisher also leads the PERSEVERE Study, funded by the National Institutes of Health, which is testing an educational program for family caregivers of people with Parkinson's dementia. Welcome, Dr. Fleisher, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thank you to everyone watching.
Well, why don't we get started by getting to know you a little bit? Can you tell us, first of all, what brought you to the field of movement disorders and how you came to become involved in this study?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very tightly knit family, and unfortunately, we joke that we were kind of hit with the neurostick. So I grew up very close to my aunt, who is in a wheelchair and has spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy. And I thought everyone had an aunt in a wheelchair who was part of their family and maybe couldn't verbalize things, but could express, her feelings in other ways. And then had a few close family members who developed different forms of dementia. And when I was in high school, my dad had a sudden onset neuromuscular problem where he sort of woke up one morning just fine. And by the end of the day, couldn't walk and almost needed to be on a ventilator and a breathing machine. And thankfully he recovered, was treated really well. But as someone in a non-medical family, really was so baffled by all of this. And as I grew up and talked with my grandmother, who had been caring full time for my aunt, and hearing about what that experience was like in the 1950s, 1960s, to have a child with neurologic illness. And they went from doctor to doctor to doctor, and no one had any answers. And almost it seemed like, why are you bringing here? Why are you bringing her here? We have nothing to offer. Why aren't you understanding that? And as I went into high school and learned about biology and thought, this is amazing and the brain is incredible. But it was just this disconnect of how can we have a field that is literally dedicated to helping people with brain disorders and not have better strategies and better communication and better things to offer the people living with it right now. Not just the research for the children and the grandchildren and future generations, which is critical. But what are we doing in the meantime for people living with this now? And how are we explaining these issues so that people can take their lived experience and put it into practice and know how to move forward one day at a time? Yeah. So I was lucky enough to shadow a neurologist who was really interested in people with Parkinson's disease dementia back when I was an undergrad. And I had volunteered in nursing homes. I had seen a lot of folks with Alzheimer's disease and was kind of familiar with that. And Parkinson's was completely new to me. It was like one of the only areas of neurology that didn't affect my family. Stay tuned. But this doc had a great sense of humor, and he was seeing of someone with Parkinson's dementia. And I kind of recognized that look, that sort of, look, and it seemed like the gentleman wasn't really particularly engaged in the conversation. And I likened that to people I'd seen with Alzheimer's, but my doc cracked a joke and the person with Parkinson's snapped right back with this really witty response. And I was like, wait, he's very much there. And this disconnect between sort of facial expression and cognition and sense of humor and all of this. And it was really kind of this moment that I was like, these are my people. I don't know why these are my people, but these are my people. And then went into movement disorders, and lo and behold, have two family members who are very, very close to me, one who's since passed, but developed Parkinson's and dementia with Lewy bodies. So I know this from the clinical perspective. I know this from the research perspective, but I think more importantly for the PERSEVERE study, I've seen what this looks like for families. And that kind of drives what I do every day.
Well, I'm really sorry to hear about your family members. It is a really painful journey to witness and to go through. It's interesting what you were saying about the research that's being done for future generations is so amazing. But we often talk about what makes Parkinson's Resource Organization relevant and unique is that we're helping people who are going through it today, while those amazing larger foundations with the way deeper bank accounts can invest in the research. So there's definitely some parallels, I think, between this exact study that we're about to talk about and the work that our organization does. So I'm really happy to make your acquaintance.
Same.
Let's jump into the PERSEVERE study. And let's start with the basics. What is the core problem that the PERSEVERE study is addressing?
So the core problem is really that despite knowing about Parkinson's for over 200 years, right? And we've got medications, we have all kinds of treatments. There's recognition that this is really difficult on family caregivers. But to date, there are no effective interventions. There are no effective things that we know. If you are a family care partner of someone with Parkinson's, here's what we do for you, and this will make your journey as the care partner better. Even in dementia, which has gotten a lot more attention and tends to be sort of Alzheimer's focused, there have been a few studies and interventions that have shown some promise and can help with caregiver strain or caregiver anxiety, caregiver stress. But those tend to be really expensive, involved, multiple people calling all the time and visits and office things and all kinds of stuff, which is not really something that's practical or sustainable or that we can implement on a large scale. And it requires a lot of buy-in from healthcare providers to staff something like that. And so the question leading to PERSEVERE was really, can we create an intervention for Parkinson's, particularly Parkinson's disease dementia, family caregivers, and dementia with Lewy body, which are kind of maybe two sides of the same coin, similar symptoms. Can we create an intervention that is practical, that is effective, and that might be sustainable? And that really drove this.
So how does the study work? What is it? What should people know about it and how to participate?
So the study is designed by and for caregivers. So this has been about 8+ years in the works of building and tweaking and building and tweaking and getting feedback all along the way. And we actually, the part of my study team is a team of caregiver advisors. So they are going through this at every step and going, not quite like that. No, rewrite this. This is better. But we took an idea that's been studied in Alzheimer's and in cancer and other conditions, which is to say, who knows the most about caring for people with Parkinson's disease dementia? People caring for people with Parkinson's disease dementia, right? And that caregivers, and I see this in clinic all the time, the question of, am I doing enough? Am I doing it right? Our caregivers have so much lived experience and so much wisdom. And so the idea behind PERSEVERE is to take these experts and to give them a little bit of training so that everyone's on kind of the same page. Because we know if you've met one person with Parkinson's, you've met one person with Parkinson's, right? And your experience with your loved one's symptoms may not be identical to someone next door. So we give everyone kind of a level playing field of, your loved one might not have hallucinations, but here's an idea of what that is, just so you know. So we recruit and we train experienced caregivers, either whose loved ones have had cognitive change for at least 2 to 3 years, and even past caregivers who may have lost their loved one. And we train them as peer mentors. And then we have created, with the help of our caregiver advisors and sort of over the course of the last 8 years, we've created a curriculum that is a 12-week curriculum. And every week there's sort of disease knowledge stuff. So 1 week might talk about hallucinations, and it's paired with a caregiving support topic. So it might be handling unpredictability or coping with anger and guilt and, frustration. Some weeks the topics kind of fit together nicely, and some weeks we just needed to fit things in. It's kind of hard to fit stuff together with constipation, but you got to talk about it, right? And so we try to cover just a huge breadth of information. And we know there's so much out there on the internet, but it's hard to know who to trust. It's hard to know what applies in all situations. So we kind of created health literacy friendly, meaning we hope everyone can approach this information and wrap their minds around it in a really easy way. Lots of analogies, lots of pictures, lots of ways of trying to explain information. And so we're recruiting over 500 newer caregivers. So someone whose loved one may have had Parkinson's symptoms for years, but cognitive changes have just started to happen in the last 2 or 3 years. Could be hallucinations, could be trouble with concentration and memory, could be trouble with sort of navigating spaces. So if you're in those kind of first couple of years, our caregivers are randomized, so randomly assigned to either get sort of a lighter version of this curriculum, but they're still getting that, or they're getting sort of the heavier duty version of the curriculum and assigned to one of these peer mentors who's another caregiver who's gone through it themselves, may still be caregiving for their loved one, and has gone through training with us and kind of walks them through, sets up a call once a week, doesn't have to be forever, but kind of talks through like, hey, did you do the reading this week? All right, yeah. But tell me, what did you do for constipation? All right. Here's something that I came up with. But really is a sounding board, is a shoulder to cry on, is someone who gets it and has been there to be able to kind of talk through and learn together. So the intervention is basically 12 weeks. And then we just check in with people and ask short questions kind of every few weeks during those 12 weeks. And then for the 6 months afterwards, the goal is to see, does this change outcomes for our caregivers? Does this help people's knowledge? Do they learn something? But more importantly, does it change their attitudes? Does it change their skills and their confidence to being a caregiver, to caring for their loved ones, supporting them? Does it change our caregivers' own health? So we ask a lot of questions about what health problems they have and how that impacts their life. And then at the end of the whole intervention, like, have we been able to move the needle on that at all? We also ask the caregiver to kind of report on their loved one. So the person with Parkinson's isn't ever really involved in the study. They just hopefully get to be the beneficiary if it works. But we ask sort of at baseline, how often is your loved one falling? How often have they gone to the hospital, to the emergency room? And when we do our quick little every 2-week check-ins, we're kind of checking every step of the way, like, any problems, so that we can look at the end and say, have we changed anything with either flavor of the intervention?
So it seems to me, just summarizing that, there's about 2 tracks. There's the track that's maybe a little more self-directed, where you get these weekly, is it weekly or monthly units?
It's weekly. Yeah. So the sort of lighter track, you get a weekly email from us saying like, hey, here's some key topics and here are resources to go read about that and learn about that.
And then the other track has the extra layer of a peer mentor who is also a caregiver who's received extra training and mentorship.
Exactly.
Okay. And this study has been going on for 8 years, or it's been in development for 8 years. What are your expectations for this study? How long are you going to be doing it? What is the end goal?
Yeah. So the grant funding this study is a 5-year grant, but each caregiver is involved in the study for about 9 months. Each of our peer mentors, so the sort of more experienced caregivers, may be involved for about 2.5 years, because they may have one mentee for 12 weeks, kind of take a break, and then they might get matched again with someone else over the course of the study. So when we're through at the end of this 5-year period, we'll be able to compare, how this changed caregiver strain and burden and all those kind of things. And the hope is that if we see that this is beneficial, we want to make the curriculum available to people, right? We know that we want that curriculum. Basically, it's sort of a book and a website that goes with it. We want that to be publicly available, but we want to know that it works. And we want to figure out, do we partner with foundations? And we have several. So the Lewy Body Dementia Association, Parkinson's Foundation have partnered with us on this to help get it out there, make people aware of it. But is this a model that a foundation or foundations together could help support, right? That we've developed how we train our mentors and it seemed to work and people want to keep doing it. And so as people go along, as organizations develop, all kinds of amazing programming, this could be part of something that they do, right? So the hope is if it works, it's out there, it's publicly available. You don't have to do it as part of a study. I think, it's challenging because the practical side of me says, I've seen it. We've seen that it works. We've got folks who were involved in, the very first pilot version of this, and they're still talking with their mentor or mentee 3 or 4 years later. They don't have to. The study is long done.
I was going to ask, do the mentee relationships continue outside the perimeters of that 12 weeks?
They do. I actually just reached out to someone, and she was last involved in the project 2 years ago. And I said, I'm checking in, just wanted you to know, the big version of the study is open for enrollment. And she said, I'm so excited. I'll share this with people I know. I also just want to let you know, I'm still in touch with so-and-so, and we speak every week. And I've had folks that this current study and the pilot study that came before it were both national. So we've had mentors and mentees who may be across the country from each other. And we've had folks that have turned it into trips, and they've gone to visit, each other in person. We've had folks that are in the same geographic region and like make it into a coffee date and meet up. We've even had mentors who are still actively caring for their loved one. And during the course of, whichever phase of the study they were in, the mentee's loved one passed away. And so the mentor, was coaching their mentee through grief, even though they themselves had not experienced it. And then they stayed in touch. And down the line, when the mentor's loved one passed, the mentee became the mentor, right? Because it's just, it's a false, there isn't really a hierarchy. If you're in this community, you're in this community.
It's more a solidarity than a hierarchy, for sure. What can you tell us about the background and training that the mentors receive?
It's a great question. So we've tried to make it as as easy for people to access as possible. So the very first version of this study, way back in 2017, 2018, we had people come in. They were in person. It was like 6 hours in-person training, and that's worked. But it's really hard. A lot of people are still active caregivers. You just can't do that, right? And so in this most recent version, it is about 6 hours of training, but 2 hours is pre-recorded online, and you do it at your own pace. And if that is, in 15-minute snippets, across the course of a couple of days, awesome. And then we schedule 2 live sessions with other mentors that can be interactive. And we have breakout rooms, and you hear from people who've gone through this and have been mentors to kind of be able to ask some questions. But we've always made sure that when we run those sessions, we offer like, okay, this portion we're going to offer, one of them we did at noon to 2 one day, and then we had a repeat version of it at like 7 p.m. that night. And since we have people all across the country, we tried to make sure that we're accounting for all the time zones. So we try to make it as convenient as possible. And we tell folks like, listen, if you need to get up because your loved one needs you, that's the priority, right? And we've recorded everything. So if someone wants to watch it again, it's there for them.
I mean, the unpredictability of Parkinson's and caregiving is definitely one of the biggest challenges that we hear from caregivers. So it sounds like you've put a pretty solid amount of thought into how to develop a program that accommodates that.
And I think it's so critical. We've had caregivers be part of this every step along the way. And so if there's ever any time that we're, discussing something and they think that we go off course, we have outspoken caregivers who've been part of this and go like, that's not going to work. What if someone has, this issue, or what if this, you should think about it this way. And it has made the study better every single time.
Well, what should our audience know about participating in this study? What does the screening process look like? Who qualifies?
Yeah. So it's not for people themselves diagnosed with Parkinson's, only for family caregivers. But that could be a spouse, a significant other, a partner, that could be an adult child, that could be a sibling. If you are actively caring for someone now, or you've been a prior caregiver, you may qualify. if your loved one has never had cognitive changes, meaning trouble with concentration or kind of fluctuations in their levels of alertness, hallucinations, things like that, if their Parkinson's is mostly movement symptoms, constipation, things like that, but not really involving their thinking or their memory, it's not open to folks there. But it really sort of is including cognitive change. But it doesn't mean that someone needs to have a formal diagnosis of Parkinson's dementia. So our caregivers are the first ones to see changes, right? So your loved one's neurologist or whoever is managing their Parkinson's may not have diagnosed anything, but you may be seeing changes. And so all of the screening begins online. We have a simple survey, and it asks a series of questions. And if you qualify based on the symptoms that you tell us that your loved one has had, that's enough. So we're not connected to the medical chart because it's going on all over the country. So we really take our caregivers at their word of what their loved one is experiencing. So anyone with Parkinson's disease, dementia, mild cognitive impairment, subjective cognitive change, they feel like something is changing, even if it hasn't been formally labeled, or starting to have hallucinations, or folks who've been diagnosed with either Lewy body dementia or dementia with Lewy bodies. Sometimes those terms are flip-flopped, but that can be when people have sort of the cognitive changes come first or at the same time as the Parkinson's movement stuff. So if you're within any of those realms, it's open to you. If you've lost a loved one to any of those things, it's open to you. And the survey online asks a couple of very quick questions, and then you kind of fill things out. We make sure that people are in the United States or U.S. territory. So Puerto Rico, we're looking at you. Guam, you can participate. U.S. Virgin Islands, you are welcome. Please come join. And we have resources on the back end for folks in every state and every territory. If people qualify based on sort of these couple of screening questions, then there is a warm phone call where one of my two phenomenal research assistants will reach out and schedule a time for a quick phone call and just kind of talk through, answer any questions that people may have, explain, do they qualify as a mentor or do they qualify as a caregiver, kind of walk them through what that looks like, make sure that, they understand what to expect, what not to expect. And if that all sounds good, then we have you do a consent form online and then some questions. And because this study, we kind of enroll a bunch of mentors, train people, and then we've got sort of our cadre of mentors waiting, and we enroll caregivers. And every time we reach 100 caregivers, that's sort of our cohort. That's our group. So we're about to launch our first cohort. We're over that 100 mark, which is really exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But there may be a delay between kind of going through all the screening, talking to someone from the team and saying like, all right, you're enrolled, hang tight until we've got everyone sort of in your group ready to go, because everyone kind of goes through the intervention at the same time. And that way, just in case a mentor has a family emergency or has to drop out, it means that we've got other people sort of waiting, in the dugout, and we can say like, hey, come on, pinch hit.
Yeah.
And they know where to jump in.
So does every mentor have only one mentee, or is every mentor, do they work with a number of people?
Every mentor will work with up to 3 mentees, but only one mentee at a time. Okay. So we really want to be mindful of not overwhelming or overburdening our mentors. We've recruited more mentors than we would need at any given time. So at any given time, there'll be 50 people who need a mentor and more than 50 mentors. And one of the reasons for that also is, to give flexibility in case someone needs to bow out. But in some of the early peer mentoring studies and other conditions, folks said like, yeah, it doesn't really matter if you match people up, on any characteristics, like a mentor is a mentor and people will get what they're going to get out of it.
Yeah.
And we kind of suspected that might, even though everyone might benefit, you might benefit more if you were matched with someone who shared, certain preferences or shared certain similarities. And so we don't pretend to assume what might be most important to any given person. So we ask people, which of the following is kind of the most important priority to be matched on? Is it most important that you have a mentor of your same gender identity, or that you have a mentor with the same relationship to their loved one, or they're in the same time zone, so you don't have to worry about that, or, something else. And then we do a very fancy matching. We're not quite Tinder. We do it all by hand and say, all right, this person seems like they'd be a good fit. And how many, preferences does that optimize for everyone? And we try to make the best matches that we can. And then we cross our fingers and hope that people get into conversation and enjoy talking with each other.
Well, I think you somewhat answered my next question, which was actually about the cultural and linguistic considerations that you make. So you just mentioned, Guam, other U.S. territories, and there's certainly some language barriers that might be present there, or cultural barriers. So it sounds like you're doing some consideration. Is there anything you haven't mentioned on that front that we should know?
So I think it's a great question. One of the things that we are really, really sensitive to is the fact that, in general, we don't have enough for our care partners, right? Sort of cutting across everyone. But there are care partners who are even more underserved than others. And so particularly, we know that our caregivers of color and our rural dwelling caregivers and our male caregivers actually are really underrepresented, and may feel very left out from a lot of interventions that tend to be a lot of, Caucasian, white women, spousal partners or adult daughters. And so we really, really want to let all of our care partners know, we want you, we want to hear your voice. We want mentors in these, in these groups so that they can help mentor, younger, newer, less experienced caregivers and say, you are not alone. Yeah. You are not alone in this. I wish, so we do require that people be comfortable and fluent in English, because a lot of the assessments, the surveys that we use to see whether this is working, are only available in English. And we can't guarantee that if we have someone who is primarily Spanish speaking, that we will have a mentor who's a match for them. So we do ask people, though, as long as you are comfortable speaking in English, is there another language that you're comfortable speaking in? And we take that into consideration. So we would love to have bilingual mentors and mentees tell us. So we want people to be comfortable having these conversations in whatever that way that helps to them.
Okay. And I know that you are located in Illinois, but this study is in many ways remote, correct? So you can participate wherever you are.
It is entirely remote. So no one is coming for a study visit anywhere. Okay. I wish I could meet all of our care partners. I wish that we had, funding and we could just have an end of study party with everyone. But no, everyone, we already have folks everywhere from Hawaii to Maine. And, you could be matched with someone totally across the country. But yes, all of it is online, on the computer, by phone. If you want to talk with your mentor or mentee on a video conferencing app, by all means, go to town. If you're more comfortable sort of analog and you just want to pick up the phone, that is also fine. But you don't have to go anywhere for the study.
Okay. Well, I am just about out of questions. Do you have any final words or anything we didn't talk about that you'd like to mention about why a caregiver should participate in this study?
Yeah, I think I'll just address one of the questions that we get asked, which is, people may qualify as a mentor and they say, I don't know that I can do this. I don't think I know enough.
Yeah.
Number one, yes, you do. I say this without having met you, individual person who is asking yourself that question, but having met so many hundreds, if not more, Parkinson's caregivers over the years. You know so much more than you give yourself credit for. You have so much wisdom. And if you think back to when your loved one was first diagnosed, just being able to talk with someone to kind of talk you off that ledge, reassure you, tell you that things may look different than you might have imagined for the future, but they can still be beautiful and meaningful and joyful, and you will laugh and, have a relationship and all of that. So enough, and we will fill in the blanks. I think the other thing to know is our study team is small but mighty. So besides my 2 research assistants who are fantastic, we have a social worker in the background who has been a movement disorders, Parkinson's, and dementia social worker, leading support groups, fielding phone calls, handling crises for a dozen years, maybe more. So we have a giant list of safety protocols. So if something is going on, whether it's just, I'm not sure that I'm clicking with the person I was assigned to.
Yeah.
You call and let us know. Whether I'm kind of worried, my mentor mentee sounded kind of depressed on the phone. I'm not really sure what to do. You don't need the answers. We've got the answers. We will take it from there. We've got all kinds of protocols on on the back end. Here's what we do. And we are screening to make sure that if someone is, going through grief right now and really sort of in the thick of it, they don't qualify right now. But we will give them resources and say, we hear you, here's some direction. And, let us know in the future if you might want to participate. But we're on the back end trying to support everyone in every way that we can. So you're not alone in this journey, whether you're in the study or not. You're not alone in the study. We've got you. We've got your back. And for our mentors, we actually bring them together once a month online so that they can kind of be their own peer-to-peer support and share what's worked really well. Where are they feeling challenged, and how can we help and make the study better and make the intervention better?
Yeah. Well, you are not alone, I think, is the most powerful message to take away from the PERSEVERE study. And for people going through Parkinson's in general, our mission statement is working so no one is isolated because of Parkinson's. That is the baseline, that you do not have to go through this alone. We can't promise that it's going to be rainbows and butterflies, but we can promise that there are resources out there and people out there who are ready and willing to help. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Fleisher, and sharing information about this study. We will certainly be following along. And of course, we will have information about the study in the caption to this video if you're watching on YouTube and in various other places. So get in touch. What's the easiest way, Dr. Fleisher, for people to sign up for this study right now? Can you fire off any fast numbers or websites?
Yes, absolutely. So I will click the website for you. I should have it right here. You can always email us. So our email address is persevere, PERSEVERE at rush.edu and say, heard about the study, interested, send me the link. Yeah. Or I will pop the link into the chat right now.
And we will have this in the caption of the video. So if you're watching and you're interested, check the text below the video. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you can get the latest information on what you need to know about Parkinson's. We are here to serve and to help you navigate life with Parkinson's. You are not alone. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Eileen. Take care.